This is VOA Africa. Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory in for Hashtag the Awards. It's Monday, August the 5th. This is Africa 54. Could a crackdown in Nigeria lead to a Shia version of Boko Haram? We'll have details. Africa 54 takes a closer look at xenophobia in South Africa. And how the NBA's Basketball Without Borders program is inspiring up-and-coming female bowlers across the continent. The Egyptian capital was the scene of a deadly explosion Monday, triggered by a horrific traffic accident that has killed at least 19 people and injured some 30 others. Authorities say a vehicle driving against the flow of traffic collided with 3 other cars outside the Cancer Institute in central Cairo. Egypt's public prosecutor is investigating the cause of the incident, but so far there has been no official statement indicating that the explosion was an attack. Now, tensions between a Nigerian Shia Muslim group and authorities is rising after a court granted permission to label the Islamic Movement of Nigeria a terrorist organization. Security forces have clashed violently with the group as they took to the streets of Abuja to call for the release of their leader, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky. Authorities have held El-Zakzaky in custody since deadly clashes in 2015, despite a court order for his release. On Monday, a Nigerian judge ruled El-Zakzaky could seek medical treatment abroad. Timothy Obiezo has more from Abuja.
Maimuna Dauda's 3 children were among more than 350 Shiite Muslims killed in Zaria city in December 2015. They were members of the Islamic Movement of Nigeria, or IMN, a conservative sect wanting Islamic law. Violence broke out when members of the group tried to block a military convoy. The military cracked down hard on the IMN, accusing it of trying to kill the Nigerian army chief.
I got a call from my daughter that the military had shot her in the stomach and her sister in the head and set the leader's house where they were hiding on fire. When I called back, I could no longer reach them. They had burned with the building.
Authorities arrested IMN leader Ibrahim El-Zakzaky and his wife. They have been detained since, despite court rulings for their release. Their supporters' sporadic protests and security crackdowns have left tens of people dead.
This government doesn't want to free Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaky. They want him dead. As they tried killing him in his house, God did not allow them. Now they keep him in their custody.
Police blame the Islamic Movement of Nigeria for the violence.
We've seen protesters carry out unprovoked attack on law enforcement officers who are on legitimate national assignment.
Zakzaky is facing murder charges for the death of a soldier killed in the 2015 clashes. He founded the Islamic Movement of Nigeria in the late 1970s and claims to have 2 million members.
They have become like a law unto themselves. In Zaria, where their political spiritual leader used to live, they constituted themselves into serious public nuisances. No responsible government can watch when public order is being breached.
A Nigerian court in late July granted permission to label the IMN a terrorist organization, further raising tensions with the Shiite sect. The Islamic Movement of Nigeria rejected the label, and observers expect further protests, clashes, and victims. Timothy Obiezo for VOA News, Abuja.
A drone airstrike by Eastern Libyan forces has hit the town of Mourzouk, killing at least 43 people and wounding over 50, according to local officials. Sunday's late evening attack is being blamed on the Libyan National Army that is comprised of forces loyal to rebel commander Khalifa Haftar. The internationally recognized government based in Tripoli opposing Haftar says dozens were killed and wounded. The LNA seized Mourzouk earlier this year, but later moved out to concentrate on trying to take Tripoli. Not too far from there, Sudan's Transitional Military Council and a coalition of pro-democracy leaders have initialed a power-sharing agreement. The agreement inked on Sunday follows months of massive demonstrations that first erupted in December over the high price of fuel and eventually evolved into demands for authoritarian President Omar al-Bashir to step down. The military forcibly removed al-Bashir from power in April, but the demonstrations continued with protests calling for democracy after 30 years of al-Bashir's tight-fisted rule.
We've entered these negotiations as partners in national justice, and we have exited these negotiations as one team. Our concern is the whole of Sudan. We have come out after the national will has been victorious. The result is that there is no winner or loser, because the interest of the nation stands above all in this agreement.
This constitutional declaration, which has just been signed, opens a new page in the history of our nation. It constructs a new milestone for this revolution. It constructs the atmosphere and path for the making of the establishment of a transitional government, which will look to the demands of the revolution to which Sudan has given the blood of its dear sons and daughters. Among the priorities of the transitional period will be the just and transparent investigation into the killing of martyrs and their punishment.
The military council and the pro-democracy leaders agreed to form the transitional government in July after 3 months of violent protests that killed hundreds of demonstrators. The two factions will formally sign a constitutional declaration on August the 17th. U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday called for stronger background checks on gun buyers in the aftermath of the mayhem and carnage in which 2 gunmen killed 30 people in 2 separate incidents that occurred in a 13-hour period over the weekend in the states of Texas and Ohio. From the White House a short time ago, a somber President Trump spoke about the tragic shootings.
The First Lady and I join all Americans in praying and grieving for the victims, their families, and the survivors. We will stand by their side forever. We will never forget. These barbaric slaughters are an assault upon our communities, an attack upon our nation, and a crime against all of humanity. We are outraged and sickened by this monstrous evil, the cruelty, the hatred, the malice, the bloodshed, and the terror. Our hearts are shattered for every family whose parents, children, husbands, and wives were ripped from their arms and their lives. America weeps for the fallen. We are a loving nation, and our children are entitled to grow up in a just, peaceful, and loving society.
Well, President Trump has often suggested the need for more mental health programs for troubled people who threaten gun violence. The U.S. once banned the sale of assault-type weapons like those used by the 2 gunmen in the weekend shootings, but the law was allowed to lapse in 2004. Now, there have now been more than 250 mass shootings in the U.S. this year, in which at least 4 people were shot or killed besides the shooter. Officials in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas, report 30 fatalities and at least 50 wounded from shootings this weekend in those cities. Republican and Democrat politicians shared their reactions on the American television network ABC and its program this week. VOA's Arash Arabasadi has more.
Oh, Sunday in Dayton, Ohio. Gunshots in a commercial district at around 1 in the morning.
What the?
The number of American mass shootings is now more than 250 this year. The gunman killed 9 and injured dozens before nearby police shot him dead. Just 13 hours earlier in El Paso, Texas, law enforcement responds to an active shooter at a Walmart. There, the gunman killed 20 and injured at least 26. Federal officials call it an act of domestic terrorism. President Trump tweeted his support to the governor of Texas, saying, "God be with you all." He said that the FBI, state and local authorities are working together in both cities. Democrat and 2020 presidential candidate Joaquin Castro laid blame with the shooter, but said the president's often heated rhetoric helps radicalize domestic terrorists.
He's given license for this toxic brew of white supremacy to fester more and more in this country. At the same time, as our national leader, you have a role to play in either fanning the flames of division or trying to bring Americans of different backgrounds together.
President Trump's acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, says mass shooters, not political rhetoric, are to blame.
There's no benefit here to trying to make this a political issue. This is a social issue, and we need to address it as that. The people responsible here are the people who pulled the trigger. We need to figure out how to create less of those kinds of people as a society, and not trying to figure out who gets blamed going into the next election.
Both Mulvaney and Castro seem to agree that narrowing access to firearms is a step in the right direction.
The answer is not more guns. The answer is to make sure that these weapons of war, these semi-automatic weapons, don't get into the hands of people who go and use them on the street.
I think we all agree that sick people who are intent on doing things like this should not be able to buy guns legally. The challenge, of course, is trying to identify who is sick when they try and buy their weapons, and that's the type of discussion we have to have.
I don't know the condition of
a hate-filled and anti-immigrant manifesto appeared online nearly 20 minutes before the shooting began in Texas. Authorities have yet to confirm its author, and one of the Dayton shooter's victims was his own sister, capping off one of the deadliest mass shooter weekends in the history of a country plagued by gun violence.
Oh,
Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Well, for more on the aftermath of the mass shootings, viewers Celia Mendoza joins me live from El Paso, Texas. Hi, Celia.
Hi, Vince.
Yes, first, if you can give us some update. I hear that the numbers of those who died has gone up.
That's right. We just heard from the authorities here in El Paso, Texas. One of the herd now has lost their life. We don't know if it's a female or a male, but we know that the number went from 20 dead to 21. That's now the official number of the people that the gunman killed here, right in this Walmart located in El Paso, Texas, in the morning of Saturday. And that is something that definitely is worrying this community, especially because initially were 26 herd, now 25. Some of them is still in the hospital.
Now let's talk about what the president said. What stood out that may resonate with the people of El Paso?
Here, the community has mixed feelings about what is happening in the words of the president. Some of them believe that it's a little too late. Others believe that it's a good time to start talking about the issues that these shootings are presenting, especially when he said that in one voice, we should condemn racism, bigotry, as well as white supremacy. And that is something that is stood up with this community. 85% of the residents of El Paso, Texas are Hispanic Americans. Family members live in Ciudad Juarez and the other side of the bridge. Actually, 6 of the victims, the fatal victims, are Mexican citizens that live in Ciudad Juarez, according to the foreign ministry of that country. So for them, this is important to have the president for the first time be more clear and direct about the possibility of going against white supremacy, especially because of the possibility of the gunman having white nationalist intentions and making this a hate crime and not just another shooting in the country.
And very quickly, the issue of gun reform, gun ownership reform, how does it play out there?
Well, Texas is an open carry state where they defend gun rights. However, many of the people believe that it's important to ban some of the semi-automatic and high-power weapons. Now, the president has mentioned that he wants to mix that with an immigration reform, and that is something that so far hasn't had a lot of welcoming responses here in El Paso, Texas, because of the immigrant community. However, it's something that they're open to evaluate according to the people, if that means that the shootings will stop and it will be less victims like what we saw this weekend.
Well, Celia, thank you very much. And that's VOA Celia Mendoza reporting live from El Paso, Texas. Now, we're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show, broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, female athletes across the continent realize their hoop dreams.
I am
Sheikh Asali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today, we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. London's Ham Polo Club hosted a glamorous crowd of African polo aficionados and those celebrating the style and joie de vivre of African culture. Lux Afrique Polo Day also featured a shopping lounge, high fashion and fine dining African style. Team Africa was narrowly defeated by Team Rudo, aka the rest of the world, 4-3. Lux Afrique used the occasion to shine a spotlight on a worthy charitable cause, Maleka, an initiative to bring education, water and health to the poorest communities in the Congo. The charity was set up by Congolese model and humanitarian Noella Kursases Masunka, who seeks to help communities escape gender inequality, poverty, and lack of education that currently restricts their choices. Next up, after Ebola struck his hometown of Beni in the Democratic Republic of Congo, 21-year-old Joel Kavuya saw a need for a positive change. So he started a rollerblade team. Kavuya hopes to mentor the children and give them something other than rice and flour, referring to aid that is poured into the province since the outbreak. More than 40 members have joined the team, most of them ages 8 to 18 years old. The skaters practice in the streets of Beni twice a week, attracting big crowds of spectators. Kavuya, who's a veterinary student, hopes to bring some positive change into the lives of the children. The World Health Organization recommended last month that the Ebola outbreak be declared a global health emergency. And finally, you're looking at the ultimate channel surfer. A French inventor on Sunday successfully flew across the English Channel on a jet-powered hoverboard. Video shows former French military reservist Frankie Zapata surfing in the air on a machine he designed over the Strait of Dover, after taking off from Sangatte in northern France. Flanked by 3 helicopters, Zapata, 40, made a stop on a boat halfway through the 22-mile voyage to refuel, before landing safely in Britain's St. Margaret's Bay. His journey took just over 20 minutes. And that's what's trending today.
Well, anti-immigrant sentiment is fueling violence in parts of Africa where millions of people are on the move in search of a better life. Many flock to South Africa, where they face a violent xenophobic backlash that has left dozens dead in the last 10 years. Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick takes a closer look.
Well, Vincent, in South Africa, you hear the same 2 words often hurled at migrants and refugees in America and other parts of the world: go home. And I spoke to African foreign nationals who live in Cape Town, and some say they plan to go back where they came from, but others say they will stay and take their chances.
In Africa, there's an illusion that South Africa is Europe in Africa. So when you come to South Africa, you have big imaginations. The illusion dies and fades away when you see that it's not far different, but it's better than our country.
Amuka Roberts' dream of working at a top South African restaurant didn't come true. To survive, he took a job at this Somali canteen in a Cape Town suburb known as Little Mogadishu. It's a close-knit community of African migrants and refugees working as informal traders. They keep to themselves for safety. Those who do open up speak of intimidation and deadly violence by local mobs.
You see if he kill you, or you see if he leave it to you.
At a Cape Town non-profit for refugees, I meet Yusuf Hussein. He fled the Somali conflict in 2010. He was given asylum but fled for his life again when Somalis were targeted in his South African township. At gunpoint, Hussein and his friends were told to leave, accused of taking jobs and living off government welfare.
I did not come from Somalia to get social grants. I came here because I wanted safety.
Hussein now has a new home, a job in the city, and South African friends.
We have to be very careful when we're discussing xenophobia. I think it's a very sensitive topic in South Africa, and we need to be very gentle around our analysis of it. I think we've got to really look at what are the real triggers and what are the real problems in our society and be able to find really good solutions to those.
South Africa's impoverished townships are a wasteland of broken promises, where the country's black majority endure crippling unemployment, rampant crime, and a lack of housing and basic services. Locals direct their anger at other Africans, many of whom come here in search of peace and economic opportunity.
How cruel are they to cause all this?
Many South Africans welcome other Africans, but xenophobic rage and rhetoric dominate headlines.
We cannot allow foreigners, even legal foreigners, to do small businesses in South Africa. That is for South Africans only.
Tembelani Ngubane and his African Basic Movement channel the U.S. president's deportation of undocumented foreigners, tougher border control, South Africa first. In Washington, South African professor Pibokuhle Mnyandu says what's happening is a symptom of a larger problem across Africa.
We must have an honest conversation around the issues of aspiration, developmental dreams that have been shattered across many African countries. These countries cannot continue to outsource that development to one country at the southern tip of Africa and there not be socio-political consequences.
Back in Cape Town, Ken Mafina experiences that every day. Born in the Congo, she came to South Africa as a child refugee. She feels South African in every way, except on paper.
There's so much opportunities here in South Africa and I can't get it because I'm a refugee.
Mafina has been waiting for permanent residence for more than 10 years. She's thinking of going back to Congo and walking away from the only place she has ever called home.
And Vincent, earlier this year, the South African government launched a national plan to combat xenophobia. To date, no one has been convicted for past outbreaks of xenophobic violence that has left more than 60 African foreign nationals dead across the country.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that amazing story that you did.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, now, climate change will hit many African countries more severely than previously thought. That's according to a new report. Researchers warn that rapid population growth means more and more people will be hit by extreme weather events across the continent in the coming years. And Ridgewell reports.
The Farana region in Guinea, West Africa. It's the rainy season, but the skies are clear and the rain isn't falling. For rice farmers like Kulare Mohammed, it could spell disaster.
Climate change has caused a shortage of rain, and as we are not getting any rainfall, it is very difficult for us to farm. We cannot plant our rice seeds because of the lack of rainfall.
The report from Britain's Meteorological Office and Leeds University warns that climate change caused by the burning of fossil fuels will bring chaos to Africa, with bouts of severe drought and flash flooding.
For the first time, we've run a very high-resolution climate model on par with the resolution that we typically use for weather forecasting. So this climate model is able to represent small-scale processes in the atmosphere with much greater realism. The small-scale processes are really important for how climate extremes might change over Africa.
The report authors say flash floods like this one in Uganda last year, which killed dozens of people, will become much more common.
We found that those sort of events, which are typically, say, once every 30 years now, could be as frequent as once every 3 to 4 years in the future. And in terms of wet extremes, heavy rainfall, we see changes across the whole of the continent. In terms of the dry extremes, particularly we find that Central and Western Africa is infected.
The World Meteorological Organization warned that the month of July this year saw record heat waves across the globe, a phenomenon that has, in its words, rewritten climate history books. Scientists say people in Africa will likely be among the hardest hit by climate change over the coming decades, with less capacity to deal with the impact. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, the NBA's Basketball Without Borders program has been scouting and training both boys and girls across Africa for 17 years. Teenage girls participating in the program, so working with women from the continent who played for WNBA teams, has motivated them to stay in the game. Viewers Esha Sarai reports from Dakar.
40 boys and 20 girls from 29 African countries are training with current and former NBA and WNBA players in this highly selective program.
This experience has been so enriching for us. It's helped me a lot. I've learned new things, and it's renewed my enthusiasm, my desire to keep going and to become someone in the world of basketball.
The coaches and mentors are helping these young players through drills and matches, but also serving as role models.
We have walked the path that they want to walk. So just being here, being able to talk to them, answer their questions, and really give them, hopefully, the confidence they need to know that if we can do it, they can, because there's a path for them.
It's because of them. They've inspired us to play basketball, really. And it's because of them that we really apply ourselves here and say that maybe one day we can replace them or play with them.
And organizers say that promoting young female players on the continent is just as important to them as working with the boys.
Our primary mission and goal at NBA Africa, when we launched, was to really increase participation in our sport. So you cannot do that by ignoring more than half the population. So I think over the years we've seen tremendous progress in the women's game.
The female coaches say that in part due to programs like these, the future for girls in basketball across the continent is bright.
It's getting better. If we remember, we were pioneers then, and the salaries, all the benefits and advantage that the kids are getting now, unbelievable. So it can only get better.
The 20 girls chosen for this program say they are returning home not only with hope for their own futures in basketball, but to share their experiences with their communities and inspire other girls to pursue their dreams. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Dakar.
And that's it. Have a good night.